when I when I arrived in Vietnam and stepped off the plane there, I had stepped into a very different world, which took some adjusting to get used to. It was a very hostile environment, very different world. I spent a year in that environment and then came back to the U.S. And I realized as soon as I got back that it was stressful. Stressful because I had adapted to a very hostile environment, and then I walked back into one that, with the exception of name calling and people spitting at you and making hand and arm signals, um, you know, except for that, uh, it was different, and I noticed it right away because uh, I I didn't have all my combat gear on. I was not used to being in a crowd of people like I was in when I stepped off in the airport. I knew I'd stepped into an environment with very different rules, and I was going to have to adjust to that. So part of the stress was trying to make the transition back in to the U.S., to a world that was not in the kind of war that I had just been in. So I noticed things were different, very quickly. I got home at night, back to my parents' house at night. Um, my father was we used to go hunting all the time, so he was very eager to go hunting. So we did a lot of bird hunting. So you have a bird dog, and the bird dog runs out in the big field and tries to find a covey of quail, and then you walk out and slowly scare them up so you can shoot at them. So we go to the field. The dog goes out. My father starts walking out in the field, uh, and then he realizes I'm not with him. I was standing in the edge of the woods, and he said, come on, let's get out here so we can get a shot at him. I said, I can't go out there. I I can't walk out in the middle of a field in the open like that, where I'm totally exposed. Um, I need to stay here in the tree line. I just can't go out there right now. So there have been so many things that I had learned about the dangers that when I first got back here, it doesn't just automatically flip back. Uh, my brain is saying if you want to survive, don't go out in the open. You can't do that. So our bird hunting trip didn't last very long. So so we came back. A couple of days later, he was trying to be innovative, and he said the duck pond over in the woods. It's a small pond, but it's actually in the woods. He said, we've been having a lot of ducks go over there lately, and your cousin Carl is coming over, and I thought the three of us could go duck hunting. We'd be inside the woods. There's no open field to get in. Okay, I mean that sounds good. I can do that. So we get together and we walk into the woods, and we're getting close to the duck pond, and I'm carrying a 12 gauge automatic shotgun. And as we get close to the edge of the water, a duck came up out of the water. And as soon as he did, as I was diving to the ground, I fired three rounds, shotgun rounds into the duck, feathers all over the place. I land behind a tree, and I saw a wing move on the duck, and I shot him two more times. And my father and my cousin are standing there with their mouth hanging open, saying, "What are you doing? There's nothing left. There's just feathers and guts all over the pond. What? I mean, what happened?" I said, "He moved. You know, if the enemy moves, you shoot him again." So again, it was a hunting experience, and um, with the stress level and the environment that I'd been in, that's just what you do. You have to take the enemy out. So that didn't work well. And about a week later, I went to see Dick Meadows, and he wanted to go deer hunting the next morning. So I thought, well, we'll be out in the woods, so I'll just have to think through this and see what I can do. So we got up really early, and we went out in the woods, and he and I were moving together to a position where he thought would be good to see some deer come by. But I could hear other people moving in the distance. I could hear there were people walking. I could hear the twigs breaking. I knew there was other people out there in the woods with us. For 12 months I've been in an environment, if you're not with me, you're a bad guy. And that really ran my stress level up, because I thought, I've got to remember, these are not bad guys. They're just other hunters out looking for deer. And just because they're not with me, doesn't make them targets. But, I managed to get through that experience, but never went deer hunting again, because it was too stressful. So, the stress that I had experienced while I was there molded me in a certain way with certain experiences that stayed with me, and the events could trigger that same stress and put me right back into a combat mode, which was dangerous, very dangerous to be in the U.S. because the people were not really enemy soldiers. But it was difficult to remember that sometimes. So, there was a separation between the stress and being back in the U.S. of 24, maybe 30 hours altogether. But all I needed was a little trigger, and then I was back. So one of the things that I like to remind people of is, when you experience a stressor, when the event is over, the stress is not over. You still have the stress in your system, and depending on how traumatic the stress is, then small things can trigger it and bring it back. When I came home in December, and there were a lot of fireworks. Fireworks made me very nervous, because they would go off and surprise me sometimes. I didn't know someone was about to set off a bunch of firecrackers, so that would kind of get my attention, car backfiring, just different things like that. I also found myself not so much being stressed, but just kind of being amazed as we would ride in the car, and I'd look out the window and I would see an open field, with trees around it. And in my mind, I would think, those trees just look like grass. They're so short compared to the trees that I'm used to being around. They look like grass rather than trees. So adjusting to that. But I was also looking at open fields. I couldn't go by one without thinking, can we get 2 helicopters in here? Can we get 3 helicopters in here? So my mind is constantly working on things like that. So it was, it took a while to kind of readjust from the previous environment back to the U.S. environment. And, one of the big things that helped me was being able to go to the Rangers when I came back. So I was around other people, who had all been in combat, and we could talk to each other, understand what was going on. everyone had some similar types of experiences, so we were able to talk about them, and it helped us work through those kinds of issues much quicker than people who went back to the civilian world.
This leads us right into the topic of today's podcast. This is episode 4, the final episode of Combat Stress, a series that Dick Thompson and I, Andrew, with modernmilitaryhistory.com and Modern Military History Podcast, we've been working on. If you have just found this podcast, I know it's tough, especially listening to these in really, really interesting stories from Mr. Thompson, but you're going to have to stop this podcast and go back to the introduction. And that states what we're doing, who we're doing this for, and starting at the beginning is the best thing to do. So you'll get here eventually, but if you're just finding us, go back to the introductory episode. All the links will be in the description below. But this is combat stress. This is about, quite frankly, some tools Mr. Thompson is able to bring us from his expertise, not only from his doctorate in psychology, but also from living through stressful events, expertise that he has on how to manage stress. Not only stress from being in combat, but anybody can learn these tools to combat their stress. So this series isn't just for veterans. Hopefully some veterans will listen, and this will help veterans, but anybody can experience stress. And now we're talking about after stress. This is the final episode of our series, and we had an introduction episode, a before stress episode, a during stress episode, and this is the final after stress episode. And Mr. Thompson, everybody can experience stress, correct?
Yes, we all experience it. If you're human, you experience it. Animals experience stress, but as humans, we tend to hang on to it longer, and it can do more damage to us.
Copy that. And this podcast is not only to share your expertise, your incredible stories and career, but the root is to help people. And right now, as we have done with every single episode moving forward, if you are in crisis, don't wait for this podcast to end or to go back and watch all these podcasts. We have a resource for you. 1-800-273-82551 is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline, and that is there if you are in crisis. Don't wait. This podcast is to help people, but that is there in case you need immediate help, because folks who are experiencing acute or chronic stress may find themselves here looking for tools. And we just want to put that out there at the beginning and the end of every single one of these episodes. So again, 1-800-273-82551. Dial that number if you need immediate assistance. We're going to move on here, and we're just going to do a brief overview of what we've gotten into previously here on the other episodes of this series. So we have talked about stress. We've defined it. We've defined what stress is. We've talked a little bit about the history of how stress as a medical term came to be. And we love history here on Modern Military History Podcast. And we've talked about your book, Dick, The Stress Effect. We've also defined what the stress effect is. We've talked about this concept of timing, and lead us through this concept because this is crucial to this series. It's how this entire series is set up. Lead us through that, the timing of a stressful event.
It helps if you think about stress taking place at 3 times. There are things that you can do before a stressful event to get ready for it. And some of the things that we've talked about, using the 7 best practices to build stress resilience and things like that, to get yourself ready before a stressful event happens to you. And then when you find yourself in a stressful event, there are different techniques and things that you can do while you're in it to help you survive it, to help you mitigate some of the damage that it could do to you, to help you be more successful, to help you help others while you're in that stressful event. And then there's what you do after the event's over. So, like in the beginning, when I was talking about when I came back to the U.S., the war part of the stress supposedly was over, and I was in a non-war zone. But stress is still with you. When particularly a traumatic, stressful event happens, it's in you, and in some cases it may be there the rest of your life. So the question is, how can you deal with it? How can you mitigate some of the effects of it? How can you make sure that a little kid setting off a pack of firecrackers doesn't freak you out? There are ways to sensitize yourself to it and get so you can react halfway normally to that. And with firecrackers, it doesn't take you long. As soon as you start thinking, a firecracker, for example, when it explodes, it kind of goes out 360. A rifle shot is directional, and it sounds very different than a firecracker going off. There are things you can do to mitigate some of the stress from before that you may carry with you. And we'll talk about some of those in this podcast.
Copy that. And we also went into, during stress episode, the difference between an acute and a chronic stressful event. Would you be able to go ahead and just quickly redefine those for the audience to refresh us? Because this is a lot of information we've packed into these episodes, and what we're doing is we are building. So just quickly define, for those of us joining back in, what an acute/a chronic stressor is.
Okay. The acute is when something happens right now, a car accident, for example. The accident happens in 10, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, depending on whether or not you're hurt. That event, for the most part, has peaked, and now you're coming down the other side. So it's a stressful event that takes place over a short period of time versus the chronic stress being something that has a much longer duration to it. So, and right now, the one example everybody can identify with is COVID-19. I mean, this thing's been going on. It's a chronic stressor, and it's been going on now for 2 years or so, and looks like it's going to go on for a while longer. So it's raised everyone's stress level up and kept our levels up much higher than they normally would be now for about 2 years. Whereas the acute, I'm stressed today, but then I'm coming back down tomorrow because the event's over. Or maybe the event lasts a week or something like that, but not 2 years. People going into combat and having a tour in combat, that's a chronic stressor because it's every day over a long period of time. Excuse me. So the other thing just to think about in terms of acute and chronic, the chronic stress raises your stress level up and it's going along, and then what will happen across time is there'll be an acute stressor will hit you, but you won't come all the way back down to where you were. So when you have that acute stressor, it'll pull your chronic stress level up a little bit each time you have one of those. So across time, I mean, you're continuing to have higher and higher stress. And if you think back over the 2 years, like in the beginning when you couldn't find toilet paper, you were still in the beginning of a chronic stressor taking place. But for a lot of people, that was an acute one. Wow. We can't find the toilet paper. We can't get paper towels. I can't get coloring to color my hair with. I mean, just all kinds of things. I have to wear a mask. So you had a lot of little acute stressors that's just continuing to raise up your chronic stress.
I completely relate to that. I completely relate to that phenomenon. Times in my life where something's happened that is stressful, and maybe that takes a while. In my personal experience, my folks got divorced when I was young, and that was pretty stressful. And it lasted for a while because the divorce process takes a while. And then it was like anything that had happened while that was going on just was, like you said, I was already stressed, but, acute stressors would come along and they'd feel so much worse because it was part of a longer event. So just sharing that for those of us who are joining who haven't been to a combat zone, that's this kind of an example from a civilian perspective. We also discussed... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to share. I was with a group a couple of nights ago, with a pretty good-sized group of people in their 50s, somewhere in their 60s maybe, educators. A big chronic stressor that a lot of the people in that particular group were dealing with was aging parents. Their parents are getting older and having health problems, and in some cases requiring health care workers to come in. And interestingly enough, not only were they having to take care of their parents, but they had kids. And the kids are getting older and having to do things for them too. So sometimes we talk about it being a sandwich generation. You're kind of sandwiched in. You have parents on one end, you have kids on the other, and you're in the middle getting squashed. And this goes on, for a period of time. And it can be very stressful. So you have that chronic stress, and then there are other things that will continue to happen, just because you're here.
Understood. And this brings us into another topic that we discussed in our Before Stress episode, which is stress resilience. And we defined what stress resilience is, and we introduced a toolkit you introduced the toolkit. I can't take too much credit for this. This is your hard work that you're sharing with the people. But you introduced the Arsenal model, which is a toolkit of different things that you can do to increase your stress resilience. Please define stress resilience for the people one more time and run us through Arsenal. And we'll just recap that way for the folks tuning in.
Okay, just a simple definition of the stress resilience is your ability to be able to manage a lot of stress, to be able to have an acute stressor impact you and be able to bounce back. It doesn't keep you down. You recover and you keep moving. If it's chronic stress, you're able to keep fighting that stress across a period of time. But you can also kind of think about it as like you have a gas tank or a stress resilience tank. So you have a certain amount of stress resilience in there, but every day you're burning some of that up to manage the stress that's going on. And eventually you can use it all up. And then the stress, creates really significant problems with you. So what you would like to do is have your stress resilience, very high, and keep it up that way as long as you can, because the stress is going to be trying to pull it back down. And the Arsenal is a technique for building it up and keeping it up there by using the 7 best practices that we talked about. And if we've got a minute here, I can just briefly touch on them. Think about kind of a circular model, and on the top of the model, see the word awareness. So awareness is I'm aware of what's happening with me. I'm aware of what's going on around me. I can feel the stress. I can feel an increase in heart rate. I can feel the fatigue. I can feel pain. Whatever it is that's stressing me, I'm aware of that. I know it's going on. But when you ask me, you okay? The typical response is, I'm good. Yeah, I'm fine. Denial. It's important that you realize, though, that you're stressed, and eventually, be able to get some help for it. And then you need rest as another best practice. All high-performing systems need downtime to regenerate. You need to sleep every night, more than a couple of hours or so. Most people need to be up in the vicinity of 7. You need to take some breaks during the day. You need to vacation once or twice a year. You need to do something besides just work. Another one is having a support group, having some people. Maybe it's your significant other, might be your dog, might be your best friend, it might be some colleagues at work, but people that that you're comfortable talking to, people who can, could come to me and say, you look a little uptight today. What's going on? And I feel comfortable sharing it. We have a relationship where we can share that kind of information. And you hear about support groups all the time with people with addictions and people with PTSD or whatever. They have support groups, grief groups where your spouse dies, and so a bunch of people who are in that same experience meet weekly and with a facilitator. So there are a lot of support groups to help you through stressful events. So having that, making sure that you get exercise. Every day you need to do something. Walk, do some knee bends, sling your arms around, do something, get some exercise. You need to eat the right foods. The food you put in your body has an impact on how much stress you can handle, and how fast you'll wear down. It has an impact on your immune system. Your attitude has an impact on, in some cases, who'll be in your support group. If you have a really bad attitude, people don't want to be part of your support group. So, but the attitude can impact your motivation, cause you to want to do things, to go do the exercise, to eat right, things like that. And then the 7th one is learning, continuous learning. Every day, try to learn something new. It might just be to see a picture of something you haven't seen before, take a different route to work, eat in a different restaurant, try a different food, just do something different, because that causes your brain cells to build, and it keeps your mind sharper than if you don't try to learn something every day. So those 7 best practices then can really build up your stress resilience.
You were talking about the nutrition part of it. You said what you eat can really impact your ability to handle stress. I think that's a great way to put it. Has anybody ever heard the term hangry, where you're hungry and everything starts to just get blown out of proportion because you're hungry? It's hard to focus on anything. I definitely get hangry, and I don't like to be around people when I'm hangry, because it's more likelihood that I might say something hurtful. So I try my best to mitigate that and realize, I'm hungry, and I just need to eat something nutritious, and then all of a sudden the clouds will part. And that's just one that kind of brought up something for me, and that's the Arsenal Toolkit. If you want to hear more about it in depth, head back to that podcast, and this is part of the Before Stress podcast. So go back and check that one out. Now, what we're doing here is we're moving into we've defined acute and chronic stressors. That was the during stress podcast, because there's two different kinds of stressful events we can encounter. But now what we're going to do is we're going to move into the topic of today's podcast, and that's what to do after a stressful event. How would you like to lead us off with our discussion today about, how to deal with after stress, so to speak?
Part of it is the learning, like we just talked about in the arsenal, is learning about stress and understanding that when you have a stressful event, and the more traumatic it is, the more powerful it'll be and the longer it will impact you in your life, that stress doesn't just go away. If we were zebras, as soon as the lion caught one of the slower zebras and started to eat him, our stress would go back to zero. But humans don't do that. I mean, even if we get away, we worry about it the rest of the day. We're stressed out about, what if he gets me tomorrow? So understanding that you need to do something after you've been in a stressful event. I mean, when you watch movies or sometimes hear about real life where a police officer, for example, is involved in a shooting, a police officer has fired his or her weapon, they have to go see the psychologist, the therapist, to talk about what they just did, to help them start to understand and deal with the impact of firing a weapon at someone, particularly if they hit them, and particularly if the person dies. That's a major stressor that's going to be with them for a long time, even though they want to deny it. So you go talk to someone, and you can find out fairly quickly how much help you might need to get through this particular event. And you can't underestimate it. It might seem like something very simple. I was in a car accident when I was 16, I guess. And, the highway patrolman and the other people who were there, said, I don't know how you survived this. I mean, I was banged up pretty good, but they said, you probably should have died. And, it got my attention for a while, just thinking about, wow, that was almost it. I am lucky to be here. So I actually spent a few days kind of going through that process of thinking about, this was almost it. It was almost over. So it can be very powerful when it happens to you. If you've had a stressful event, find a safe place. You need to find a place that you feel safe, that whatever just happened is not going to come get you and hurt you more. There's someone there that you can talk to, or if you need to be quiet for a little while, you can be quiet, but you feel safe, psychologically safe as well as physically safe in a place to let you be able to start to deal with it, and then activate your support team. So you call your BFF and say, this is what happened. Yeah. Can you come over, or can we meet somewhere for lunch and kind of chat? I need to talk to someone. I'll just feel better if I could just, kind of verbalize what happened and what I'm experiencing, and you can tell me if I'm crazy or whatever. I need your help. So somebody on your support team, and it might be your dog. But if it's your dog, remember, the dog will probably wag his tail a lot and things like that, but words might not come out of his mouth, but you'll know what he's saying. So activate it, get plenty of rest, drink plenty of water. Whenever the stress goes up, it starts a dehydration process, and that just physically makes you feel worse. So water can really help you. And the sooner you can get back into your normal routine of what you normally do, and feel like you're back on track, the better. But you may find you need some help to do that. And you might need to go talk to a mental health person and set up some weekly meetings or whatever to go in and chat about how you're doing and use their experience and knowledge to kind of help you move forward, because you want to keep moving. Even if you have to take short steps rather than run, you keep moving. And I tell people I work with, you run if you can, but when you can't run anymore, you walk. When you can't walk anymore, you're on your hands and knees crawling. When you can't crawl on your hands and knees anymore, you get on your belly and you crawl like a reptile, but you're always moving forward. Keep going, little pieces at a time, but keep going. When you stop, then you begin to have some problems, and you'll start to go backwards, and you don't want to do that.
That's resonates pretty strongly. Resonates really strongly with me. I'm listening to the points you're making, and it's tough to kind of single out a single point, because it sounds like I'm putting it above the others, but really it's just something that really hit me and I kind of want to elaborate on, and that's just accept that you have been through a stressful event. I brought up the I think I called it the John Wayne complex a couple podcasts ago, or maybe and this is what I mean by that. I was raised on John Wayne, Sands of Iwo Jima, the Green Berets. And, the Duke, what does the Duke do when everybody else is stressed? Have a drink, have a smoke, it's fine. Tough guys don't get stressed, so we're told. And I think the incredible thing that we're doing here is, dare I say, John Wayne was a movie actor. And you, sir, did some of the things that he played on the movie for real. And you are the real guy who is saying, I got stressed, so I think we should really trust the man with the credentials here. But I was raised on this John Wayne concept that, men don't feel stressed. Men don't appear weak. And I remember my family, they knew I was stressed out. And because they know me, and they're my support system. And that leads us into another point you made: activate your support system. Well, sometimes, especially when you come from an Italian family, the Italian women are always activated in terms of supporting you, whether you want it or not. And these individuals in my family were saying, you should really look into getting some therapy. And I remember at the time, and I look back on that very foolishly, and I was hardcore John Wayne. I had my spurs on, and I was, going into the saloon, and that was my mentality. I don't need no therapist. I'm not weak. I don't need a therapist. But that turned out being one of the best things that ever happened to me. And one of the just admitting that was one of the biggest steps that I ever took to being able to work through what turned out to be a very, very chronic, stressful point of my life. So that one hits me hard. Except, and you've said it before, and you've said it again, the most common response to stress is denial. And I think that's because a lot of people are subjected to their own form of the John Wayne complex. What do you think about that?
I think you're right on. We don't want to admit that we're stressed, that we might have a chink in our armor someplace. Very often, we're like M&Ms, the candy. We have the hard candy shell on the outside, but on the inside, we're soft and mushy and all chocolatey and everything. But we want that hard candy shell out there, and we don't want someone to think that there's a little crack in there someplace, because we've been taught, particularly as men, to be hard, to be like John Wayne, not to show our feelings for the most part. But sometimes you need to do that. And you need to admit it to yourself that you need some help, that you're not as strong as you would like to be, but it's okay to ask for help, to accept help.
I kind of want to touch on something that I think is, a big problem in our society, and this is after a stressful event. A lot of people turn to drinking or a drug of their choice. What do you have to say about that? What do you have to say about that after stress approach? Because I will say, things like taking a drink or things like doing your drug of choice do relieve stress for the short term, but they can have long-term consequences. So what's your take on that?
Because of the kind of work that I've done, the kinds of organizations I've been in, I've seen people use that technique a lot, and I still hear them talk about it today, about coming back from a mission, for example, and going straight to the lounge once they cleaned up, and stay in there and drink until it closed, and that helped deaden some of the physical pain as well as some of the psychological pain. They could talk, they could tell stories, they could do things, they could socialize with their buddies. To some degree, they were in a support group, but using alcohol as an example to kind of get through things. But I saw a lot of people who couldn't get rid of the alcohol afterwards. The alcohol became a problem, a big problem for them. It might have helped them temporarily to get through the stress that they were in, but in the long term, it created more problems for them.
In your experience as a psychologist, what kind of damage can this kind of technique do to you psychologically? As you, I guess what I want to ask is, let me back up a second. In my experience, when you learn a technique that alleviates your stress, especially when you're in the middle of like a chronic stressor, if you learn that there's something you can do, I'm not stressed for that hour or two, you form kind of a mental connection with that. So then every time you feel stress, you think, I got to go do that. That is how I manage that. Psychologically, what does that look like?
It's an addictive behavior. It's just like taking any other drug. That's your go-to way of dealing with stress or whatever it is. I'll have a drink. I'll, go shoot up. I'll do something. But it all has a downside to it that you're going to have to deal with at some point, relatively soon. I see a lot of people today, a lot of service men and women who are going to therapy programs with the VA, and they get loaded up on painkillers, and they become addicted to the painkillers. And then even though they might be getting over whatever the initial issue was, but now, they're drug addicts. And people don't listen to them when they're trying to say very often, I don't want drugs. there's got to be something else I can do besides take painkillers. So you can at least maybe not get the narcotic type painkillers. You might be able to use ibuprofen or something like that. You still have to be careful with it, but it's not quite as addictive, as oxycodone or something like that. So you have to be careful what you choose to be your drug of choice, because it can put you in a lot worse shape maybe than you are right now.
And I think this wraps around back to kind of putting a Band-Aid over something that might need serious attention. Only speaking from personal experience, you can only run away from something for so long, and sometimes utilizing the wrong techniques to seek relief from that stress can forge those connections, can feed that behavior pattern, and create a terrible spiral. And what I think is powerful about the tools that you're bringing out is that these are healthy, mentally, physically. These are healthy ways, to deal with that stress. And what I really like is your can't walk, crawl example. And something that I heard and that I really love is that if you're in a low place, it will be a low door that opens itself to you. So if you're in a low place, don't look high. If you don't have a job, don't look for a CEO job. And it's going to be a low door that opens, but if your attitude's right, if you're continually moving forwards, people will see that and people will want to help you. And I also just want to stress the importance of support systems. I just keep coming into contact with the importance of how invaluable people who care about you are, and how important that is, and how forging those connections will pay off much more than any kind of short-term, per se unhealthy habit would. And again, I would like to bring us back to some things that we can do to build stress resilience, because this arsenal model that you have talked about and that you've brought to us, I've been using these things and it is awesome. I know I keep getting in stressful events and I go, I'm going to do some box breathing. So in the framework of an after stress event, walk us through how Arsenal can continue to serve you.
Well, we talked about drugs a little bit. So you're talking about chemicals into your body that gives you some relief. But what you'll find is that if you're doing exercise increases the dopamine. When you go do a run, you get dopamine dumped into your system, and it's like a reward. It makes you feel good, and you're excited about it, and it's not hurting you when you go swim or you go hang out with your buddies, and in a non-alcohol drug way. You get an experience like that from it. So you're getting these rewards for doing things that are not very harmful to you. In fact, they actually help you. So if you can focus on those 7 best practices, it's very healthy ways to help you overcome just about anything. And when you go do it, you feel better, you get better. And I hear people all the time, like you were saying a minute ago, saying, I was just shocked. I thought, well, looks pretty simple. I'll give it a try and just see what happens. And then they're hooked. And they say, wow, I mean, I just couldn't get over, how much better I felt. And it didn't take that long to get that way. And then I started working on another one. And then I realized all of these are interrelated. If I exercise, pretty soon I start to think, I need to be eating healthier, and then I can run faster, jump higher, do whatever around exercise. And if I'm eating better and I'm exercising, I get better rest. I sleep better. And when I can sleep better, I'm more aware. And, it all ties in together as one piece. So
I think of it kind of like momentum. It's like
Yeah.
you get that positive momentum going, positive things happen. If you get that negative momentum going, that is a slippery slope. And I definitely resonate with, you start doing good, you start feeling good. Because I really like the archetype of facing the dragon. Not chasing the dragon, that's something else. But facing the dragon. And you see this story over and over again, especially in like fairy tales, where there's a dragon and the knight has to go fight it, and there's things in his way, and the knight's really small, and maybe the knight can't do it, but he takes care of things along the way, and eventually he realizes he can fight that dragon. And then the big finale of the Disney movie is it was inside him all along. And that's an archetype. But there is truth. Archetypes like that have truth. If you take care of small things, like, making your bed. You're in a low place, you make your bed. You eat, start eating right, start formulating positive things. They really start to snowball. And I'm not the expert on the psychology of this. I can only speak from personal experience, that and from people I've talked to, that this is something that's just relatively indisputable. You start doing good things, you start feeling good. Another thing here is drinking water. I just did another podcast the other day with a lot of participants. And a couple times, I was getting a little stressed. I would literally take a drink of water, do some box breathing. It doesn't show up on the podcast. It's like a superpower, and that helps. It really helped. And then all of a sudden, I'm not in the middle of the stress. I've done something. I focused on something else, and now I'm able to think. All right, this is what to do. These are my next steps moving forward. Those are some key takeaways from me from those points you just made.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be something big. It's little things that can have, a big impact, particularly across time. But, I find people really like it when I talk to them about box breathing, and I did the group the other night, and the big boss was in there. And when I said, when John comes into your office and you're really stressed out, you can do the box breathing while he's talking to you. He's not watching your belly, and that's the only way he's going to know that you're doing that. But you're calming yourself down while he's there, keeping your stress level down, so you can interact more effectively. And they thought, oh, that was so cool. I mean, people don't have to know I'm doing this. I can just do it. And it works. Taking a drink of water. I can just, reach over, get my glass, take a little drink. And no one is going to think, wow, Thompson was stressed and he had to stop and get some water. He drinks water all the time. It's not a big deal. But it has an impact on you right then when you're getting a little stressed. And when your stress level goes up, I mean, when it starts to go up high and fast, your mouth gets very dry, and a little drink of water just to wet your mouth a little bit, it just helps bring you right back down. So yeah, I mean, it sounds very simple, but it's a powerful tool.
So let's touch back on something else the people can do to help with their, this is the After Stress podcast, but, touch back on the Stress Emergency Performance Card. This is also a powerful tool.
Yeah, we had talked before about having the stress performance card, and this is a little card where, depending on the kinds of events you might run into, you go ahead and identify things that you might need to do or you might need to remember, like just on most cell phones. You have an emergency call procedure on there. A lot of them, you push a combination of keys and it'll automatically not only dial 911, but it can dial your significant other. It can dial your best friend to tell them that you're in trouble. So there are things that you can set up like that ahead of time that you don't have to think. You push a button and all these things happen automatically. Because when you're under a lot of stress, and particularly if you've been in an accident or something like that, you just don't remember those things. But if you can punch that one button and all these things unfold. So you have that. You can have the little card in your pocket that you can pull out, and you have your doctor's number or different numbers on there, people that you need to call in a particular type of emergency. So you think through, like we talked before, doing things before the stressful event. What are things that are likely to happen to you in the environment you're in, the work you do, the family situation that you're in? What are things that might happen that you can prepare for now? You can make decisions before the stress and put them on that little card. So it's already there. You don't have to stop and look up numbers. You don't have to think, well, here are the 3 people I need to call. Here's what I need to do. And a gentleman the other night said, what if I'm driving down the road and I come upon an accident and people are injured? What do I do? I said, those are things you can think about beforehand. You're going to call 911 immediately, and you're doing that when you see it happening. And then you're getting out of your car if you park safely, and you got to remember there are ways to park if there's an accident on the side of the road, so you don't get hit getting out of your car to go help someone. And then, there are things when you find someone, who's injured, it helps if you can pull out a little card that says, be careful about dragging the person out of the car, because you don't know what kind of injuries they have. They may have a spinal injury or a neck injury, and you drag them out of the car, you may injure them worse than what they are now. In a lot of cases, it's better they don't move. They stay where they are until the ambulance, the EMT guys get there, and they've got their backboard and they know how to get them out and get them on it. If the car's on fire, that's a different story. So if it's on your card you have fire, you get the people out of the car. You just have to take a chance. But you can have those checklists like that.
I love this
you can
concept.
have them on your phone. So
I love this concept because it's like, pardon the metaphor, but it feels like kind of like a SOG mission. The enemy's out there. Yeah. The enemy's out there, and you can't avoid the enemy. because you have a job to do. And it is no longer the Vietnam War, and the people listening to this, I can guarantee, are not doing SOG missions. Maybe other kinds of missions, but not SOG missions. But this metaphor rings true, because life keeps happening, and preparing yourself. Because, I have found that if you avoid stressful events, you're avoiding life. Because anything in a life that is worth living, you might get a little stressed when you're coming into contact with things, especially when you're growing, moving into new areas. So preparing for that, like, cleaning your car 15, making sure your equipment is squared away, making sure, your emergency, your radio has batteries and everything's ready to go and everybody's briefed and everybody's trained. You're doing that internally. You're preparing yourself through your lifestyle, and then that becomes self-supporting. And then what you're doing is, I love these the card idea. Something you can have on your person, something you've rehearsed, and it is literally like it is your armor, so to speak, moving forward in the world, knowing that even if you get stressed and you forget what you have been working on, you have something there to remind you, to bring you back, to center you. So the stress emergency performance card is something I am already formulating mine. I'm going to tell people right now, me and Mr. Thompson went to start recording this episode, and I was a little stressed, didn't do my box breathing, and I forgot to hit record. And about, 2 minutes in, I said, Mr. Thompson, I'm so sorry, but I forgot to hit record, and we need to start over again. So I am also subject to stress and continually working. But what I've been meaning to do for a while is create a checklist, a pre-flight checklist to each podcast moving forward. And in a way, that's kind of like a stress emergency performance card, because that's always the most stressful part of the podcast for me, is before we get into it. When you get into it, it's happening, it's flowing, but beforehand, that's just my experience. So that's another part that resonates with me.
Yeah, and sometimes the card that you're making is not for you. Like if you, don't know that, it's not going to focus on that, I guess, but almost did. But there's a little app, top left corner, first screen on the phone, that has the emergency symbol on it, and the EMTs, they look for that little app that's on there, because as soon as they hit that, if I can be unconscious, but here's my name, my address, my blood type, emergency people I'd like them to call and say I'm on my way to the hospital or whatever. So it's got all kind of information to help them help me if I'm unconscious or something or not able to talk. So, you can have cards like that on your phone. You can have them on your person when you're going places. If like when I go out to run, bike, or swim, I have an ID bracelet that I wear around my wrist that's bright red, but has a metal piece on it with my name, the emergency contact phone number, things that if I fall off the bike or a car knocks me off, I've got identification information right there that the EMTs can see when they find me. So having those emergency kinds of cards or information helps protect you when you can't protect yourself. But then there are others, like we've been talking about, that you can go to the notes section in your phone, and you could have these things listed out, a checklist, like your pre-combat checklist for insertions, for ambushes, for extractions, for whatever. It's right there, and you just pop it up when you're about to go into a situation like that, and make sure you got it. And you mentioned it a few minutes ago, but you have a pre-combat so to speak, or pre-podcast checklist, that you use to make sure you got everything set up, everything turned on, everything ready to go, because you're thinking about so many different things when it's coming up that it's easy to miss something if you don't pull the list out and look at it. Your pilot flying the plane, he or she's got all kinds of checklists that they have to look at, before they can take off with the plane. And then in the air, when different events happen. And, I'll just share something that I discovered working on the stress book with the airline that went into the Hudson, 10 or 12 years ago.
Yeah, and Captain Sullenberger.
Yeah. When they hit the geese and the engine shut down, the co-pilot had a checklist. What to do when you lose power in both engines. And he starts down the checklist. He didn't finish it. And the realization happened after that accident that checklist was designed for what you do if you lose power in both engines at about 30,000 feet. And they were at 3,200. There wasn't enough time to go through the checklist before they hit the water. So, you have to think through the checklist. Do you have time to do it? Or are there different places you start based on the amount of time that you have or what it is? So,
but, the thing about that episode is that, Captain Sullenberger is a national hero for what he did. Movies have been made about him. He is, your book, The Stress Effect, uses that as an example of performance under duress. So, but this is the thing, and something you and I have talked about off camera, is that, everybody is just a human. Sullenberger is not a superhuman being. I think one of the great things about working with you is, and you sharing with us that you had lasting, there's a lasting impact on your life after SOG, because a lot of people, I'm sure, will listen, especially the R&R mission where you jumped out of a helicopter to save guys single-handed. People are going to hear these stories and they're going to think, that he would never have stress. He's like John Wayne. But, everybody has stress. This leads us into the final point here. You can do this. Whoever's listening can do this. These are tools, and these podcasts are accessible. I got your book, sir, and I do not want to badmouth it. I want to badmouth myself. I had to read parts of it a couple times because it's heady. There's a lot of information in there. The great thing about these podcasts, like your book, if you get The Stress Effect by Henry L. Thompson, allegedly your name is actually Henry, that's a resource that you can access time and time again. You can earmark parts of it that speak to you, and you can come back to these podcasts and reacquaint yourself with certain tools. There's a lot packed in here, and we've done our best to recap and lay it out and discuss it so that it's palatable. But you can do it. You can do it. And I think that's an important piece of validation.
Exactly.
Well,
you just have to do it. You have to keep moving forward.
Yeah, and support system, diet, rest, the Arsenal system helps you get there. The emergency performance cards help you when you get there. Get all these things on you, like your equipment for a SOG mission, and you're ready. You're ready for when the enemy starts coming, and you're ready to combat the enemy. And this time, the enemy is stress, Everybody feels stress going through life. You will feel stress if you're going through life in a way where you're always pushing the ball forwards and building up your stress resilience. That's the Before Stress podcast. See it? It all loops back into itself. You can do it. These are tools for everybody to be able to continue living their best life and come out of stressful events better and ready for the next one. Before we finish it off, sir, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just to reiterate what you were saying, it's not easy, but you can do it. And you're going to have to live in a stressful environment. I mean, that's what we're in as humans. And if we can use some of these little tools, little techniques, it can help us get through it much easier. It can help us to help others or be a resource for others. So, and some of it you can enjoy. All stress is not bad. Yeah, riding a roller coaster can be a little stressful for you, but it's fun. It takes your breath and jerks you around a little bit. But, so stress is not all bad. You need some just to stay alive. But if you can have some tools to manage it, keep yourself in a comfort zone, then it can be a lot more enjoyable. So I appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts over these 4 podcasts about stress, and I really hope people get something out of it that can use and make their life a little less stressful.
Copy that. It has been a privilege to be able to work with you on this. I am dedicated to not only preserving military history and working with veterans, but also trying to help veterans. Hopefully this will be able to accomplish that, and that would just be an honor to be able to give something back. But also, as somebody who is not a veteran, I know that this is very helpful to anybody who listens. So this has been the Combat Stress podcast series. You've listened to our final episode after stress. Go back and listen to the other ones. I'm going to finish it off here. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, sir, again for your time. And for everybody listening, thank you. If you need immediate help, if something has come up, you have found this podcast and you didn't hear it in the beginning, if you need immediate help, please call 1-800-273-8255. If you are in crisis, that is the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. We are here to help people, but if you're in a crisis, that is a resource that can help you right now. These tools we have gone over in these last 4 episodes are for the long haul, for the duration, for the fight to come, the fight you're in. But if you need immediate help, don't hesitate. 1-800-273-8255. To everybody listening, thank you. This has been episode 4 of the Combat Stress series with Dick Thompson, with me, your host, Andy, with modernmilitaryhistory.com and the Modern Military History Podcast. And we have had the privilege of speaking once again with Mr. Dick Thompson. Mr. Dick Thompson, thank you again.
Thank you, Andy. I'm Dick Thompson, and we would really like to hear any questions that you might have had based on today's presentation. So if you could submit those, we'll get answers for you.
You can submit those questions by commenting on the YouTube video that you just watched, or you can email me directly. My email is at themodernmilitaryhistory@gmail.com. All one word, no capitals, no funny letters. We look forward to it. We'll be doing a question and answer with Mr. Dick Thompson after we get enough questions put together here. So please, if something came up for you that you would like to know more about, you'd like to ask Mr. Thompson about relating to these stress podcast episodes, please ask, and we'll include it in our question and answer moving forwards. Thank you.